When the storm rages, love is tested at its deepest. In a small village swallowed by relentless rain, Linda struggles alone to keep her fragile home from collapsing under the flood. At the same time, Quang braves the storm on his motorbike, desperate to secure a safe shelter for them both. But on his way back, the raging waters strike, sweeping him into a fight between life and death. Will love give him the strength to survive? Don't miss this gripping story. Subscribe now and join us as we dive into their unforgettable struggle against nature. The sky above the little village where Linda and Quang lived had turned an ominous shade of gray, heavy with the weight of storm clouds that seemed to press down upon the earth. All morning the rain had fallen relentlessly, like an endless curtain of water. But now it had grown even more violent. Thunder roared in the distance, and the downpour struck the rooftops with a deafening force, as though the heavens themselves were breaking apart. The quiet fields that once stretched wide and green around their home had vanished beneath a churning sheet of floodwater. The familiar paths where Linda often walked barefoot now lay submerged, the earth erased by nature's fury. She stood in the doorway of her small wooden house, staring out into the storm, and fear coiled tightly around her chest. Her home, a modest shelter that had seen many seasons, shuddered against the howling wind. Each beam groaned as though it were bearing the weight of the sky itself, and every gust made the walls tremble. Linda's heart ached as she looked at the place that had been her refuge for so long. Could it withstand this merciless storm? She wasn't sure. The roof, patched countless times before, already leaked in thin streams. Water dripped down onto the wooden floor, forming puddles that reflected the pale light of the storm. She hurried inside, her hands trembling as she dragged out a large piece of worn canvas, the only shield she had left against the rain. Balancing on a wooden stool, she stretched the tarp across the beams, pressing it down where the wood had grown soft from years of weather. The sound of the rain was overwhelming, a constant roar that swallowed every other noise. But Linda's mind was sharper than ever. She thought of Quang, who had gone out in the storm, and worry gnawed at her. He had promised to find a safer place for them, perhaps a small inn or a room in a sturdier building, somewhere dry where they could wait until the waters receded. But until then, she was alone, fighting with her bare hands to protect what little they had. Each time she secured a corner of the tarp, another leak sprang from a new crack, and she had to shift again, soaked to the skin, her hair clinging to her face. The house creaked like a wounded creature, but Linda refused to give in to despair. She worked with quiet determination, driven by a mixture of fear and courage. Memories flashed through her mind, the evening she and Quang had shared dinner here by the soft glow of a lamp, the laughter that had filled these walls, the dreams they had whispered to each other before sleep. All of it was wrapped inside these fragile wooden planks and patched roofs. To lose the house meant losing more than shelter. It meant losing a piece of themselves, the life they had built with so much love and effort. Outside, the storm showed no mercy. Sheets of rain fell so hard they blurred the world into shadows, the sky and earth indistinguishable in the watery haze. Trees bent and swayed under the violent wind, their branches snapping and crashing into the flood. Yet Linda pressed on, tying knots, pressing cloth against the leaks, whispering prayers under her breath. She told herself that she had to hold on until Quang returned. She had to protect this home until his arms wrapped around her again. And so, with every drop that fell and every gust that rattled the walls, she fought, not just against the storm, but against the fear that threatened to drown her from within.
While Linda was struggling inside their fragile home, Quang was out on the road, his figure almost swallowed by the storm. He had left at dawn, determined to find a safe haven for them both, but the journey was far more treacherous than he had imagined. The rain blinded him, hammering against his face with a sting sharp as needles, while his motorbike fought against the rising flood. The road that once felt so familiar had transformed into a river, the lines erased, the edges hidden beneath torrents of muddy water. Potholes became traps, currents pulled at the tires, and each turn felt like it might be his last. Yet Quang pressed forward, his hands gripping the handlebars so tightly his knuckles turned white, his heart beating with only one thought: Linda. He could almost see her in his mind, standing in their house, struggling with those leaking tarps, her hair wet from the rain. The image tightened his chest, fueling his determination. He knew that the home they loved so much was vulnerable, its wooden beams too old to endure a flood like this. He couldn't forgive himself if anything happened to her while he was away. That was why he had gone, to find a room in a sturdy house, somewhere on higher ground, where the two of them could stay until the storm passed. Every second mattered. Every splash of water against his legs reminded him that time was slipping away. The village was chaos. People shouted to one another across the flooded streets. Children cried as their parents lifted them onto boats made from plastic tubs and old wooden planks. Doors banged in the wind, roofs rattled, and stray animals howled as they searched for shelter. Quang rode through it all, weaving carefully, offering a hand when he could, but never pausing for long. His mission was too urgent. He passed a group of men hauling sandbags, their faces grim as they tried to shield their homes from the advancing tide. He wanted to help, but Linda's face, pale with worry, flashed again in his thoughts. He pressed on, promising silently that once she was safe, he would return to help rebuild what the storm had destroyed. Finally, after what felt like hours of battling the storm, Quang found a small guest house still open. Its walls were concrete, its windows shuttered tight against the wind. Relief washed over him for a moment, but only for a moment. He bargained quickly with the owner, paying in advance, his voice hoarse from shouting over the storm. When the room was secured, he wasted no time. He didn't care about resting or drying himself. The only thing that mattered now was getting back to Linda. He could already picture her smile when he told her they had a safe place to go. Her sigh of relief as she realized she wouldn't have to face the storm alone anymore. That thought was enough to give him strength. With the key to their refuge in his pocket, Quang turned his motorbike back toward the flooded roads. The rain hadn't eased. It had only grown heavier, sheets of water falling so fast it blurred the world around him. But his spirit remained steady. Each drop that struck his skin felt like a challenge he was willing to face. For Linda, he would endure anything. As he pressed on, leaning against the storm's unrelenting push, he whispered her name under his breath, a vow that no matter how fierce the storm became, he would find his way back to her.
The road back was darker, more merciless than before. The rain no longer simply fell, it pounded like war drums, each drop splintering on Quang's helmet, each gust of wind pushing against him as though the storm itself sought to drive him away. Water had risen higher, swallowing half the wheels of his motorbike. The once solid road beneath him had vanished into a rushing torrent, a dangerous river that twisted and pulled with a force stronger than any man could resist. Still, Quang pressed forward. His jaw clenched, eyes narrowed against the stinging rain. He kept repeating in his heart, "Linda is waiting. Linda is waiting." It was not just a thought. It was the rhythm that carried him through the chaos. But nature had no mercy. Ahead, the water surged from the rice fields into the road, a sudden wave crashing with terrifying force. Quang tried to steer, leaning into the current, but the torrent struck like a giant's hand, slamming against the motorbike with unrelenting power. The tires lost their grip, spinning helplessly.
His heart lurched as the handlebars wrenched violently from his grasp. In an instant, he and the bike were swept sideways, the machine toppling, the world around him dissolving into water and thunder. The sound of metal scraping against the submerged ground mixed with the gurgling roar of the flood. And then the bike was gone, dragged into the depths. Quang fought wildly, arms thrashing against the current. The cold water clawed at his body, tugging at his clothes, pulling him down, down into its swirling darkness. He gasped for air, his mouth filling with rain and river, choking him as his lungs burned for breath. But his spirit refused to yield. He thought of Linda again, her soft voice, the way she smiled when she tried to hide her fear, the way she touched his arm as though her presence alone could study his heart. He could not leave her. Not now. Not like this. With a surge of will, he kicked upward, his head breaking the surface long enough to gulp a ragged breath before the flood dragged him under once more. The storm howled, indifferent to his struggle. Branches and debris slammed against him, an old chair, a plank of wood, a tangle of weeds uprooted from the earth. Each impact bruised his body, but he kept fighting. His hands reached desperately for anything solid, his eyes stung with the sting of muddy water. In those frantic moments, time stretched unbearably, each second a test of his endurance. Above the chaos, thunder split the sky, echoing like a cruel reminder of how small one life was against the wrath of nature. Back in the fragile house, Linda worked tirelessly, unaware of the battle Quang was fighting outside. She was still tightening the tarp, pressing against the leaks, whispering prayers under her breath. Every now and then she paused to glance at the door, certain she would see him walk in, drenched but smiling, carrying hope in his tired eyes. She could not know that at that very moment, Quang was being tossed like driftwood in the violent current, his body weakening with every crash, his strength slipping away. Yet even as his limbs grew heavy and his vision blurred, Quang clung to one thought: I must go back to her. The flood could strip him of breath, of strength, even of his body's will to fight, but it could not take away the fire of his love. With the last of his strength, he reached out, fingers brushing against a tree trunk jutting from the water's edge. His grip slipped once, twice, before finally locking tight. He held on, gasping, his chest heaving, rain pouring down his face like endless tears. He was alive, but barely. Somewhere beyond the storm's roar, he imagined Linda's voice calling his name, and that faint vision was enough to keep him clinging to the tree, refusing to surrender to the darkness of the flood.
Hello, xin chào tất cả các khán giả của kênh Lý Tưởng Nina Review. Vậy là trong tập phim ngày hôm nay của chúng ta thì CEO Quang trên đường đi tìm nhà trọ về đã quay trở lại nông trại để báo tin cho Nina là anh đã tìm được phòng trọ mới và để thăm Nina. Thì trên đường về thì trên địa bàn Nina sống đã xảy ra trận lũ quét làm cuốn trôi cả Quang lẫn chiếc xe máy. Liệu rằng anh có thể sống sót hay không? Mẹ và Nina có cứu được anh hay không? Tất cả sẽ được hé lộ vào các tập tiếp theo, sẽ được phát sóng hàng ngày trên kênh Lý Tử Nina Review. Các bạn hãy đón xem nhé. Các bạn nếu thấy video hôm nay hay, hấp dẫn thì các bạn hãy cho mình xin một nút like, một nút chia sẻ và để lại bình luận ở dưới video nhé. Cảm ơn các bạn rất nhiều. Xin chào và hẹn gặp lại vào các tập tiếp theo. Bye bye.